community, Comeback Team podcast, the Game On and IMG Academy edition. So we've got Steve Shenbaum back with us. You know, last time we really talked about communication and presence and influence and how we represent, but relative to our society, our relationships externally and impersonally. You know, this time, in a lot of ways, we're going to dive way deep to the pillars and make it more intimate, more about family, deep friends, our innermost confidence and network. Because so oftentimes we present a completely different self to the world as to those who love us most. You know, and oftentimes in not the best way or not the most advantageous way for all. So, you know, I'm hoping we can explore some of those crevasses and get deep down into opportunities for how we can improve our relationships, improve our deep support structure so that we can accomplish all of our goals as we, you know, navigate our setbacks and come towards our comebacks. So with that, Steve, thank you.
You just reminded me of something. This will show that we're not rehearsed at all. So thank you, Robert. As you were teeing that up, I thought of something. I hope that the audience and listeners really understand that we all have permission to kind of realize that it's not perfect. So I'll just share this. I usually share this and say, don't tweet about this, but actually you're gonna, because this is gonna be public. This is important for people to hear, you know, as you were sharing about intimacy and what we present out in public versus, or on social media versus with our children. I'm blessed to have a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old. A couple of years ago, my 9-year-old was like 7 and she ended up in timeout in the middle of the morning, you know, and I had to go to work and teach, right? I teach leadership, communication, and I was yelling at her, get in timeout, and she's like, no. And I was like, whoa, this isn't in the book, the parenting book. Like, get in timeout. She's like, no. And she yells to my wife, Jackie! And I'm like, who are you talking to? She's like, I'm talking to my mom. I'm like, that's my wife. Like, I'm having a rational conversation now with a 7-year-old, right? Like, the wheels are off. Now, you're never going to read about this on my Facebook page.
Right.
And then my daughter looked at me. She was like, where are you going? Because I had to leave. And I looked at her. I go, I'm going to teach leadership. And I slammed the door and went out that house. And I remember driving away going, man, this is crazy. You know, here I am, like, I'm going to teach leadership. My kid won't stay in timeout, yelling at my wife, calling her mom Jackie, by the way. Don't encourage that. Point being, and maybe this could be the open, is like, you know, maybe we need to all realize it's not all humbled and blessed, and that we need to be real with each other, and that it's hard to parent, it's hard to be a husband and wife, it's hard to be in a relationship. We are messy, gritty human beings, and with that, maybe we'll have permission to be kind of real for a second, for a millisecond. That was a Hamilton quote, by the way.
Amen.
I agree, and you know, I think social media itself, you know, really contributes a lot to this.
Yeah.
Instagram is, no, people don't really post the strikeouts.
No,
you know what I mean? They don't post the air ball. Everybody watch this.
Yeah.
You know, they're posting their best life. They're living their best. It's a life that you can create visually for someone to think this is exactly who you are.
Sure, I'm guilty of it.
And what's happened is along the way, there have been many people that, you know, some of these younger kids, they've only grown up with Instagram, so they don't know what it was like before that. Yeah. So since they've ever been able to know how to use a phone, have been creating their own life or their own image, their own likeness. Yeah. And what we're trying to do now is we're trying to kind of reverse engineer whatever society has been feeding them over this last several years and say, hey, you need to be authentic. You need to be real. You need to accept the failures. And it's hard for us to do, you know what I mean? So, but what I found to be successful is to just really look at it, and I like showing the chinks in the armor. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like showing myself doing some cool exercise or maybe catching a ball or something like that. But, you know, there was a video of my son and I, Brian, the other day. We were on vacation and we were jumping out of, you know, waist deep water out of the pool. And he's doing it off one leg, and he's making it look easy.
It was impressive.
And I tried, and it was my 7th attempt to jump out once. He's jumping in and out one leg. I jump out, and I keep falling down. You know what? The one I posted was the one of me not making it. Yeah. You know, because I think they need to know that there is a real to this thing. We're not always perfect, to your point, and it's okay to show those chinks in the armor.
Here's one of my concerns about social media, though, is that, as you said, so many kids and young adults today, they grew up with it and that's what they know. Mm-hmm. The problem is that I'm seeing is that they don't take constructive criticism very well. They don't know how to communicate very well or have a good face-to-face conversation without looking at something here. That's my concern of what's going to happen from here moving forward. So, and how do you correct something?
That could be an interesting gateway into this conversation that you teed up, Robert, about how do we like kind of be in intimate relationships. So I'm not going to push back on that, Chuck. I'm going to kind of yes and that, and I'd say, yes, that is the issue. But I don't think that we need to put a blame on it. You know what I'm saying? I think that's where it gets dangerous.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And I'm with you.
Yeah,
I'm with you. Like, I watch young people. I'm like, oh, they're sitting on their phone. Well, I have my phone addictions too. Mine might be Instagram, but it may be Facebook. I think what's more important is to think about, like, okay, what is it that's driving all of us? So they may have I say they as if it's a different, some people might have Instagram, some people might have Netflix binge watching. It's the same dynamics. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Some people might have NFL, no disrespect to the NFL, it's like 4 games in a row, all Sunday, you know what I mean? And some people might have Snapchat. So I guess for me, what I'm fascinated by when it comes to connection is, all right, if a young person is going to play Fortnite for 4 hours, right? And an adult couple, is going to binge watch Netflix for 7 hours. I want to know why both groups are driven to do that. And I'd like to figure out those dynamics so we can take some of those dynamics and incorporate them into, for me, selfishly, getting to the gym, which I need to do, getting my work done, honoring my staff. So to me, it's a discussion on not, I can't believe you're doing that. It's, why are you doing that?
Well, I would say that, interpersonal communication is through this process of social media and how we currently live in this digital world, especially through COVID and the absolute necessity of having to conduct business digitally and so forth for most people. Not only were we already kind of losing those interpersonal communication skills on a regular basis, that muscle was not being flexed. But now that we're coming out the backside of it, it's, the way that we do business now almost demands that we have to understand that virtual world, which kind of helps create that chasm, that divide. But what I'll say is this, hunter and gathering societies, you didn't have a choice. You had to communicate to survive. And I think that what happens is true authentic communication, and you look at the different ethnic groups that have come up through the years, Native Americans, and they told stories and they continue to hand these stories down. And different communities have done this, and different societies and families have done this. We don't do too much of that anymore. That line of communication is starting to be broken. And what I love about what you do, it's starting to engage in deliberate communication that may be outside of what the norm is for today, but no less important than what's necessary for us to continue to communicate moving forward. Because if today they stripped away all of the social media and all of the digital communication, who would survive? It'd be people that understood that authentic communication.
But all of that social media is exactly social media. And, we present a different self to society than we do to our family, our wife, our kids, our everything else. And, what I really hope we can dive into is the differences between how we communicate and express through social media, and then more importantly, how we can be authentic, real, benevolent, loving, supportive, an advantage to our family. Because God knows, I failed. I mean, I'm one thing online, I'm one thing professionally, publicly, everything else. And let me give you an example that won't be about me and my own personally caused dysfunction in my home. Last week, I'm sitting there in clinic, and I've got a really serious spine case that I'm discussing with husband and wife, and it's real, and it's massive, and it's disabling. And it's so obvious that we need to do surgery, but the wife just finally gets to an exasperation point. She's been sitting there quietly the whole time. And forgive me, but you have got to operate on him. He has been such an asshole for 2 years, okay? And that was so compelling because, that kind of is what this is about. This is somebody who's in deep hurt, deep problem, struggling to live with it, struggling to cope with work and life and family. And that exposed the private little hole that he and his family had found themselves in, which was different than him coping and him navigating that. And from a community standpoint, and everybody's got their own version of that, hopefully not that intense, but that's out there. And that's kind of how I want to set that stage.
It's a great set. And I want to dive in. I want to honor what you said earlier, though, Chuck, because we went quick on that at the beginning. Like, your concern for these young people that are like, stuck on a phone. I agree with you. I do. And I being kind of the elders in this group, it is a concern. I think that we need to remember that there's studies done. Actually, Harvard, I feel like every study comes from Harvard Review, but Harvard did a study on what's the most important, most important aspect of our health. And they figured out over years, and it didn't surprise me at all, it's about relationships. It's not blood pressure. It's not how many likes you get. It's not your fitness and your strength. All those things are a factor, obviously, but it's relationships. So actually, coming off of what you said, like the concern of watching people just sort of staring everywhere you go, right? Like, come on. Yeah. I think that we're DNA for relationships. Relationship is always going to be the belle of the ball, but we are certainly moving away from it. So here's
it's a pendulum. Yeah, we're shifting away from our deep relationship towards our social relationship.
And what's going to end up happening, I believe, this is just sort of, I always am worried about like, I think, because then it becomes, I think, I thought, and then I look back and going, actually, I was wrong, So I put all of this, I could be wrong. But I think that what's going to happen is they're just eventually going to have to retreat back to relationship, because it's like, how can we figure out, and we were trying to in Game On, what drives a young person to play a video game for 4 hours? What drives a couple to watch 6 hours, binge watch? And we've actually found there are some common denominators. I'd love to just kind of throw this out, and we can discuss it.
Absolutely.
And we created an acronym, because acronyms are easy. It's called MILE, and it's not the be-all end-all, but it should be MIGE, but it's MILE. I'll explain that. The M is mystery. Like everything in social media, everything in a video game is embedded with mystery. There's a mystery element to it. It's intrigue, like what's next? I don't know. It's an intoxicating factor. So everything we teach, all of our exercises, have an element of mystery. Not a wild sense, because too much mystery becomes ambiguity, which becomes frustration. But there's always an element of mystery. If you think about Netflix, if you think about movies, if you think about video games.
Oh, climax.
Yeah, there's like, what's going to happen? I don't know. And if it's revealed too early, you're out.
Yeah,
you just tune it out.
It's over.
That's why the reveal shows like reveal this house, whatever that thing, they do it at the end. Yeah. If they revealed the chopper, like the motorcycle,
fast
they
forward,
did.
boom.
Yeah, if they revealed
you watch for 59 minutes and then
you wait for the reveal. Now, if they don't reveal, you're mad.
Yeah.
But the reveal is, so the I of MILE is incentive. Like there's always got to be something they're driving towards. Video games, it's easy. They want to get to the next level, right? In Netflix, it's like, I want to finish the next one so I can finish. People say all the time, yeah, I finished that season. Like,
yeah.
Like, you're more excited about that than a promotion. Like I watched all 15 episodes of what? That's incentive.
That's a badge of honor.
There's an incentive. The L is laughter. That's the mile. Now I said MIGE because I really think it should be joy.
Joy.
But mile's a better acronym than MIGE.
Yeah.
So the L is laughter. There's always an element of laughter. Even if it's a horror film, the L is like community. There's like, we're doing this together, right? And then the E of MILE is empowerment. Every addicted thing, and I'm not saying just negative addiction, positive addiction too, has an element of the person feels completely in control. That's why the video game industry called it a controller. That was the most brilliant thing Atari did, was they took the device and they called it a controller. Wow. And now that's why children are like, where's the controller, right? They're always looking for the controller, like, because they want to feel like they're the pilot. I went on a little bit of a run there, but like I hope you smarter people than me can run with this. But MILE, Chuck, because we started this kind of like kids, and I'm with you. MILE is what's driving, I think, Fortnite. MILE is what's driving Netflix binge watch. And you know what, to just wrap this run, MILE is what drives relationships. Because if you look at hide and seek, which is the most played game in the history of civilization, which is we base all of our exercises on, it has MILE. Mystery, where's Chuck? Incentive, I got to find him. Laughter, when I tag you, we both go, ha, 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 and we switch. Empowerment, we think we're running the show. Ready or not, here I come.
That's interesting. I when we were talking about social media, right as you're cueing, I was thinking, well, crack. I mean, it's addictive. You get that rush. You get that neurochemistry, and you get
now
that,
you're coming from a doctor's point of view.
And the neuroscience of it is real. And you can
serotonin,
do that same
dopamine.
thing. Dopaminergic pathways, limbic system activates. You get all this rush that's internal. Amphetamines, crack, cocaine, epinephrine. It all does it in a boost mode. It's kind of Red Bull on steroids. But it's that effect. But you can get that in your normal routines in a healthier way.
That's the whole key, though, Doc. Don't go too quick on this, because you could find it in the 24-hour Le Mans you did. You could find it in walking in nature. You can find it in getting your workout in. You can actually find it in being
endorphins naturally that are safe non-addictive.
And they're different for everybody. How you tap into that is different. And that's why it's such a unique art form, I would say, because, every athlete's process, to go stand on the mound and get ready to throw the 7th game of the World Series is not the same. Everybody's at bat at the bottom of the ninth is not the same. They approach it differently. They tap into it differently. This one right here, we'll be listening to Jay-Z and Eminem, and know every single lyric of it right before he goes down and skis down, 99.90, at top speed. Because that's his mindset. That's how he taps in. You play this in the operating room too, don't you?
It depends on my mood.
Yeah.
If I'm amped, I want to subdue. If I'm subdued, I want to amp. Because ultimately, I want to be middle. But I'll throw you a curveball. So, when you're doing all this, and there's a neurochemistry to how you complete a task or how you do habits. People think habits are behavioral. There's a neurochemistry to habits. Habits are pathways that your brain establishes where it feels incomplete if that pathway isn't occurring. So the more you program habits, the more natural they are and the less difficult it is to achieve them. So, but it does take an imprint. It takes on a cell by cell layer. And it's not just behavioral. Behavioral is initiation, motivation, activation, desire, and joy. But then once it's all in there, you've got to unprogram it to leave it. Like you have that routine, that habit you do, and if you didn't do it that day, you actually don't feel okay. Right. It's not behavioral.
Right.
That's good.
So here's my question: is with the suggestions and the experiences and the concepts that we've professed over the course of the last 6 months.
Yeah.
Do you have any suggestions of how we can convey this so it's empowered, so the individual really receives it and starts to implement some of those strategies that work for them?
I think twofold, and this is what I love. And I was like, I think Chuck's going to get us to the good to do. You know what I mean? Like, because that's where we need to go.
Well, I'm a 3, and that's why we do it.
We were talking about earlier about, for the viewers, like idea of 8 being high energy. TA and I are usually in that 8, the 5, which is sort of more middle, Robert, and then Chuck comes in with the 3. But all jokes aside, the 3 is what keeps us grounded. Yeah. We could go off 55 minutes on this podcast. And so to answer your question, again, I don't have all the answers. I'm not a guru per se, but I think first when we are communicating with others, and we started this with like intimate relationships, so let's stay in that audience for our viewers and listeners. I think we need to first have empathy and share with our people we're talking to that we're in this with them, that it's not like we've figured all this out and we've mastered it. I think the answer for me is to convey by establishing boundaries. I think if we're talking about, this is to me the good to do. So if we're talking about social media, talking about distractions, we mentioned Netflix and these things, and how can we kind of find healthy habits? For me, and I'm still struggling with it, it's about boundaries. So it's about time boundaries. It's about saying no to certain commitments. It's about literally taking your phone and not making it your alarm clock. I know these are so basic, but I actually think that people don't want to share them because they think people won't receive them because they're not like epic, revelatory messaging. But what I can only say what I'm doing, what my family's doing, Chuck, and again, imperfectly. I already told the story about my child not being in timeout and not staying in timeout. Turn technology off 30 minutes before we go to bed. We try not to check technology for 30 minutes after we wake up. We call it 30 for 30. We have limits on how often our children are on. I remember reading about Steve Jobs saying I would never let my kid have an iPad. I was like, what?
Yeah.
So that's a few ways. I hope that maybe helped with like the answers, just practical techniques that we can apply.
But we're also trying to get people on their journey for a comeback
so
to adhere to, let's say commence and then adhere to their exercise program, or I'm going to leave work a little earlier and take whatever personal time to either my family or dedicated to myself, so they take care of themselves. How do we get out of that?
I know you
how
got
do we get out of that habit?
I got to tell you, and then I want to hear this from you, because I've thought of you when I've answered this question. For me, again, I cannot speak universally. The best thing that we need to do is to encourage people that the start is the key. And I think the messaging, and again, I'm going to your world, really your world, your two worlds, not in a knock, I'm celebrating it. I think people that are not elite athletes, that aren't in the fitness and strength and mental wellness space on a regular basis, we get convinced, or we convince ourselves, that the start means I got to run a marathon tomorrow.
Right.
Which really is an easy way to not do it.
Yeah.
Versus, how do we begin? We encourage them to take accessible, reasonable steps. So actually, the regular person, which is most of our viewing audience, hopefully, can have the dopamine release of finish line. Right. I say that all the time. The dopamine release of finish line comes from, hey, take a 20-minute walk today. Because I can do that. But you know what, if I watch TA's videos and I compare myself to him, which I shouldn't, then I'm never going to start. Because I'm like, I can't jump out of the pool with one leg. I ain't doing that. So you know what, I'm not doing anything.
Well, I think I was going to say that it brings up a good thing. You talked about creating and developing boundaries. That's one aspect of it. That is the start. But then it becomes, how do you continue to reinforce those boundaries, right? Because it's easy to slide back into old habits and old ways. So being able to set those boundaries, create and then maintain those boundaries. And then, you know, I think also, and we discussed it earlier, you know, you have to, we always talk about, you know, having each other's back, right?
Yeah.
Having each other's back. And, but I think as Dr. Masano always talks about, you know, if we're in an airplane and those oxygen masks come out, it always tells you to do what? You know, you have to put oxygen on yourself first, because you have to be able to be the best version of yourself if you want to be able to be equipped and in a position to help others. So you have to even have your own back, right? I know you talked about that before, Steve.
Well, we were discussing it before we went on the podcast. You know, there's no secrets here. We're not like saying we have a script or anything, but you know, I think about you. You talk to my brother who is in need of spine surgery. Like, you went above and beyond, and you're all of three of you. Your expertise is extraordinary. But the idea, the pun is not missed on me here. We say have each other's back. I think we need to say we have to have our back. We have to have our back. And I think the leadership space that I'm in and the communication space that I'm in, I hear a lot of messages that are actually misunderstood. So I think we do need to be selfish. That's a really weird message to share to people.
But sometimes to be selfish, you need to be able to message to your inner circle in a way that it's purposeful and they're part of the plan.
Yeah.
And not isolationist and
Sure.
exclude them from the plan.
Sure.
So it's adversarial. There are so many barriers.
Yeah.
And when I think of your mile, I think of that. I think, wow, you know, if people in the midst of their crisis, their setback, they're trying to find a comeback, they're already struggling to communicate with their most beloved. But now they've got to be selfish to succeed. It's a setup.
Yeah.
And so the strategy is you got to really back up, pause, communicate better early, come up with a vision mid, and then execute as a team. But it's got to be a concerted joint effort.
And I agree. And so many people are relying on, is there an existing box that I fit in for my condition to help have a stepwise function to create success or get me out of wherever I'm at? Sometimes it takes that extra step to be able to be proactive enough to kind of create your own path. The path might not be out there available for you. You might have to be like, do the extra work. Yeah, it's a custom-made program for you, fit for Steve Shenbaum, for his own success, whether it's his health, his career, his family. And you said it earlier, it's not just a book. It's like, you know, I wasn't prepared for my daughter to tell me she wasn't going to stay in timeout today, right? They don't tell you those stories, right? We have to be able to blaze that on trail.
I think it fits best in your hashtag, better every day. Best you can do is better is another one. You know, nobody needs to have any expectation that it all looks the same and there's a cookie cutter way to achieve it. Bottom line is make it better.
And the other thing I'm learning is that some of these things are not grand, but they're not shared enough because they're not grand. I'll give you an example. As a public speaker in front of people, no one stands up and says, hey, everyone, you should try to strive to get 8 hours of sleep.
Right. It's
just not a very exciting statement.
Yeah.
It isn't. No
It's
one's
life-changing, but it's not an exciting
It's a game
thing.
changer. Like, again, I'm not the doctor here. I'm not the expert here in wellness and fitness, but the gateway to my wife and my better decision making and not child staying in timeout and me making clear decisions is to get 8 hours of sleep. Focus on your health and wellness in order for you to be the best leader, parent, husband, wife, uncle, aunt, teacher, all of it. That's where you talk about inspiring to inspire others. Yeah.
Well, Steve, thanks again, man, for taking the time with us. We really enjoyed this, and I know us as the comeback team are also going to take some of these nuggets of wisdom, and it'll help us communicate with our community even better moving forward. So thank you so much.
It
for
means a
taking
lot
the
to
time
me.
today,
I'm
brother.
part of your community because I'm one of these folks that want to continue to come back.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, no, and we would love to have you. You know, and honestly, just talking through this, I think helps us. It helps all of you. You know, as we grow, remember, this is a dynamic process. Individually, we're all going to grow. Community-wise, we're all going to grow. Societally, the intent is to raise the sea. You know, we experienced some unsteady waters, some troubled waters in the last few years, and we have an incredible opportunity to raise the sea. And you know, usually when I see a really difficult time, I kind of aim for the rafters, and so I see now as a perfect time to disrupt for excellence in our personal lives, our fitness lives, our health lives, our medical lives. You know, preventative care has been a tagline for my entire medical career, which started in 1988, hard to believe. Well, never really hit home except for the early adopter, you know, scouts up front of the herd. But I want to get herd effect in order where everybody is interested in their personal health, their personal well-being, their preventative health, their controlled health. Don't relinquish your health to pharmaceutical companies. Don't release your health to doctors. Let them be your servants, your tools, your authorities when you need them. But we have the ability to empower ourselves to control our own health most of the time, most of us. And when we don't, we have authorities who are brilliant, who can help guide us through those troubled waters. But this is a pivot, and I'm just so hopeful that the craziness of the last 4 years is actually the best opportunity I've had since I became a doc in 1988. So with that, thank you for joining us in the IMG Academy Game On Comeback Team podcast. You know, this has been a real swing away from what we've talked about lately. It's probably been the most fun for me. So thanks again. Follow us on social media, website, join us, have your friends join us, let them become part of the community. Always inspire to inspire. Have a great week.